Hello, everybody. Hope you can hear me okay. Let me know if there's any sound issues. We're coming in, well, had some technical difficulties, but things are getting sorted out now. Alrighty. Let's see here. Everything seems to be good from what I can see on the screen here. But if anyone can't hear me or you're running into any issues, whatever, just let me know in the chat. Oh, and I need to switch this to all chat. There we go. Awesome. Pop that out. Cool, cool, cool. So I hope everybody is doing okay today. As you can see, I'm in the garage and I've just been busy kind of picking up and cleaning up because the shell is going to go off to the paint shop again. There's just a few little paint corrections I am hoping he can take care of, basically on the roof, nothing too serious, but that's going to go off and then hopefully we can start building this engine, which you can see I've got behind me here. But I kind of just set all this stuff up so you guys could see it. And if you have any questions, Q&A, this is about the Restomod build. So now is the time to ask it. I know that there is a lot of detail in this build. So I figured I'd just do a live Q&A and see what you guys wanted to see. If you had any specific questions, anything like that. Let's let folks get in here. Got a few folks kind of filtering in. I hope that this is a good time. It's kind of like lunchtime here in the US, and I guess 6 hours ahead, you're kind of in the mid-afternoon, late evening, or early evening in Europe. Mm-mm. Alrighty. Joseph, you're asking if the manifold is for the turbo on that engine. Yes. So this manifold is from Bagsport. They are a manufacturer, or really a fabricator of these manifolds. But let me rotate the engine around here so you can see it. But let's see, not in camera. So 3 collectors. It's still a 5-port head. And all of these collectors are equal length. That's a big deal about these Bagsport kits. Running into a single collector here, which goes into the hot side of the turbo. This right here is the downpipe with your AFR gauge or AFR button on the back. And if we rotate this around, let's see here. There you go. So the turbo on this is a GBC 20, and it is obviously made to suit. The cool thing about these kits is that they don't need any bulkhead modifications. The subframe does need just sometimes a little bit of a notching out of it, but the turbo itself and all of the manifold stuff will sit on the left side of the engine bay. So if you're looking over here, the turbo will come up and over to the side here and sit with the filter kind of like right up front there. I had a different version of this manifold, and it was excellent. It was made by Fusion Fabrications. They did a wonderful job, but that was made for a GT17 turbo. This one is a GBC 20, so it's a more modern turbo. There's a lot of kind of like intricacies here and there that are different between them, but for the most part, it is a more modern turbo. It's no longer water cooled, so you've got your oil feed, oil drain at the bottom here. That needs to be clocked a little differently, but oil drain here, and then I'll have to put an oil cooler in terms of like making sure that the oiling system gets cooled. Let's see, what else do we have here? Just checking the chat. Mark B says 8:30 on the West Coast. Yeah, I didn't quite think about that. It's pretty early over there, isn't it? People waking up. Wes says, "Where are you from, brother?" I'm in the U.S. I'm over in North Carolina, so shop here in the southern portion of North Carolina. And then Joseph says it must have an engine to. I don't know why YouTube is blocking this. Or blocking that word. It's kind of covered up, but to suit the turbo, I'm guessing is what that says. Um, yes and no. The right way to do it is to build the engine to suit the boost that you are trying to run. So, the last time I ran this engine was with the GT17, and I ran 15 psi. And the engine has forged internals in it. So it's got Omega pistons with 18 cc dish pistons. So big dish. And the goal is to bring the compression ratio down in the engine to kind of combat one, the heat, but also just this engine is not made for tons and tons of boost. So you need to, kind of accommodate that with your build. Um, the compression ratio on this ended up being, I think, 8.1 to 1, thereabouts, after all the measurements and things are said and done. So that is my base compression ratio, and then boost on top of that. But yeah, so regular A plus crank, but it is A plus rods and the Omega pistons. Let's see here. Wes says, nice. I'm from England with two little minis. Excellent. That's great. I'd love a second mini. There's a lot of space over there that could go with another mini over there. But Sailor Brand says, hi, are you at IMM in Germany this year, next year? I am definitely considering it. So obviously flying from the US to Europe is quite expensive. I'd really, really like to go to it. Just a matter if I can make finances work. That's the goal, though. I'd really, really like to go to Germany next year. Oh man! So the last episode, if you guys haven't seen it, I just posted it on last Sunday or earlier this week. I forget what day I dropped it, but that went out a few days ago, and we were covering kind of assembling everything on the Mini here, and everything. There's so much left to do on the car, but you can kind of see there's some wires starting to show up here. Doing the wiring harness and like setting up the Haltech ECU, the Haltech PDM. The car steers now, so it's officially a rolling shell, which is really cool. But yeah, just kind of getting a lot of the supplementary stuff set up. It's a process. For those of you who have built a car, you probably already know this, but the devil's in the details. You get to little bits and pieces, and suddenly you're totally derailed. Like, oh, I need to do the electrical wiring for the rear of the truck, or rear of the Mini. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, but you need the parking lights, so you need to do electrical up to the front too. Or the fuel pump's up there, but the ECU is not connected yet. So how are you going to power that? It's like pulling a thread that just never ends. Let's see here. Wes says, what made you like minis? Well, I had a 2007 Cooper S, the first year of the turbo minis, the first year of the modernized turbo minis, and I really, really loved it. I didn't actually know much about the original classic minis before I started, but then I discovered them after I drove that car for a while, fell in love with it, ended up getting this one, and ended up selling the new Mini. I haven't had a new Mini since, just because one, this takes a lot of my time, but two, I just kind of like these a little bit more. But oh. Yeah. Sailor Brand says, it seems you planned a single line brake system. Why? Well, the original brake system on this Mini was a single line system. This is a 1960 shell, and I just like the look of those chrome single line systems. It has been great the whole time I owned it. You keep your brake system serviced. It's not that big of a deal. Um, Totally true that two-line systems or multi-line systems are definitely safer. But I wanted the classic look. The trade-off was enough for me. Uh, Yeah, kind of the short answer. Oh man. So what's everybody working on their cars these days? Obviously, working on the Restomod and all that stuff, but there's lots of stuff going on, I'm sure, all over the world with people's minis. They always require a little something, don't they? Sailor Brand also says, so no booster then. That's right. Yeah. One, in order to put a booster in, I'd have to relocate it somewhere because the turbo takes the place of where the booster would sit. I've always driven this car without a booster. It's definitely not a requirement for a car, especially when the small. The brake system feels great. I've never really had I've never really thought about like, oh man, I really wish that this was a boosted brake setup. I've driven boosted cars and they're great, but I like this kind of direct feel from the single line system. Just boom, straight to the brakes. Mm, mm, mm. All righty. Uh, so I just tried this question and answer system on YouTube. I'm not sure what it does. So let's see. I'm sure people can ask questions on that and it'll pop up over here. Hover any, so let's see what they said. We'll see how that works. I think I just lost some of the questions though. I saw the one before I switched it over to this mode, but it said, what was the power figure? So when I took this engine off, it had been on the dyno. If you weren't in the stream yet, it was at 15 psi. It's a 1293 cc engine, and we produced just at 208 horsepower with the GT17 turbo. So I'm hoping for something pretty similar with the GBC. There's a lot more sophistication in this build than there was in the first one. The first one was kind of more basic. Um, Whereas this build is introducing things like drive-by-wire, um, uh, boost controller, like an actual electronic boost controller. Uh, I mean, all sorts of other stuff. The list goes on and on. I could probably just sit here and list off sensors and systems and stuff, but kind of show you. So this is the intake manifold for it. This is an original mini spares manifold, I'm pretty sure. It has my takeoffs on top for various different things. Blow off valve, map sensor. This is the boost sensor for the Smith's gauge. They have their own sensor. It's fuel injected. And then this is the drive-by-wire throttle body. So you can see there's no cable driven it. You have a plug down here, which I'll wire into my ECU. And then that controls how much this butterfly opens. The cool thing about this is that when you have this set up properly with your drive-by-wire pedal, you can attach different throttle curves to it. So when you are in stop and go traffic and you just kind of like lightly touch the accelerator, the car is not going to just jump off the line like crazy. You can kind of scale that up. So after you get your foot farther into that accelerator pedal, it might ramp up a little bit higher, something like that. I'm going to play with it. I'm not really sure what I'm going to like, but it'll be cool. This motor also can control the idle, so it'll open and close the butterfly and control fueling all at the same time to get you like a nearly perfect idle, which is pretty cool. I don't know if this question and answer thing is working, but let's go back to the live chat, see if it works. Yeah. So it looks like Elliot posted a question separate from the Q&A, but the questions don't pop up over there. This is my first time using that, so if you see questions or see something like that, maybe it has something to do with super chat. So if like you like pay, it'll post a question. I don't really know. But Elliot, you are asking what made you go for drive by wire. I mean, some of the things, just like what I was just talking about, really, really excellent fine-tuned idle control. it is arguably a safer system. It has more control that you can attach to things like fueling, boost cutoff, all of these different things that just make it more reliable. Instead of just having a single wire cable that can break, that can slip, that can do all sorts of different things and cause issues, the drive-by-wire system, aside from a failing motor inside the throttle body, gives you so much more control. Like, did you get a sudden drop in fuel pressure? Okay, turn off the or shut the throttle, make sure that it doesn't keep running on. Um, its fail state is still shut like a modern throttle. It's actually shut with just a teeny tiny little opening. But I don't know. The kind of short answer, I guess, is I wanted a more reliable and easier to control system, which seems counterintuitive. What's cool too is that this throttle body right here, if I don't know if it'll actually show you on there with the lights behind it. Yeah, my laptop camera is not quite good enough. This is a Bosch throttle body, and the one that I have here is 45 millimeter, and it is from actually I think it's 44 millimeter, but it's most commonly used on Fiats, but it is a genuine Bosch throttle body. It's very reliable. These are used on tons of modern cars in various different sizes. So really excellent little setup. And we just modified it to mount to our fuel injected flange throttle body attachment. Sailor brand. Let me show you that question. Ooh. So, if you didn't see the previous build, basically this is a front mount intercooler. If you are not familiar with intercoolers and what they do, basically hot air goes in one side. So as you can imagine, when you're spinning up your turbo with exhaust, it's hot. And so that air gets sucked into this intake, spun around, compressed, and shoved out that hole on the bottom. That will then go into this end. This sits in the front of the car. This mounts to the gearbox casing and the original alternator mount. This is cooling the air that's inside it with the air that's outside it. And then this is going to go up over the top of my engine here and around into the throttle body I just showed you. So it'll sit something kind of like right about there, give or take. Yep. What else y'all got for me? Now this question and answer session is definitely like I started it for the car and the build and the Restomod stuff. But if you guys have questions that are related to your cars or maybe something that you're working on, please ask them. I'd love to help you out with that. This isn't just exclusively about this stuff. The question and answer session is really ask me anything. Mm-mm-mm. Yes, Joseph, the differential on the gearbox is an LSD. Yes, that's correct. Let me go grab one. I actually have an extra because I'm doing a customer build for a gearbox, and I can show you what I have and what I am using. I haven't even opened it yet. Man, that's some strong tape. Need me some scissors. While I open this, what year is your car? So the car is, the shell is a 1960. The engine that was in it when I bought it was a 1275 already. The original 850 is lost to the ages. When I bought it, I didn't have it yet. So, or when I bought it, they didn't have it with the lot that came with the car. So originally it was a yellow color. You've probably seen in my previous videos, it was blue for a long time. And then now it's obviously willow green, but the car, yeah, was originally a 1960. All right. Sailor Brand says, is the water cooler on the side enough for this powerful engine? So when I had the GT17, which also was water cooled, so I was plumbing the coolant through that turbo, it still managed to keep the temperature down just fine. So it does use the original mechanical fan here on this pulley, but I also have an electric mounted fan. Some people call it a thermo fan, but that's controlled by the ECU. So basically, if the car starts to get too hot, the coolant temperature sensors start to get too hot, the ECU will kick that on. A lot of people put that on their regular minis, not turbocharged, anything like that, and just attach it to a switch. So when they see on their gauge that it's starting to get hot, then you just flip that on. And it worked pretty well. I mean, honestly, it was kind of surprising. I drove it here even on like really hot days, like Charlotte gets pretty hot in like 38, 39 C, sometimes into the 40s. And even on those days, I wasn't comfortable inside the car, but the engine seemed to be just fine. Callum Rawson. So you are asking, will the RTS be balanced by our AC Dodd in the same way he normally does it? Looking to get an RTS for my turbo build, but needed AC to balance it up. You have solved that problem. Yeah. So if y'all haven't seen, I am partnering actually with another gentleman that was in this chat, Elliot Stringer, and AC Dodd to sell RTS clutches. We have just listed those on the site. Those will be balanced in the same way he does all of his other setups. So the way that we have this kind of structured is Elliot is going to be building up the RTS portion, the two springs, the whole clutch side, and then getting it set up with the correct drive straps and bolts, everything that it needs in order to keep it from flying to pieces. And then that will be sent off to AC Dodd with the flywheel, where he will machine down the horns on the flywheel as well as balance the flywheel, balance it as an assembly so that once you get it, it is genuinely just able to bolt right onto your crankshaft. Now, in a perfect world, you would balance the flywheel and everything with the crank too, but but sending that RTS fully balanced, it just kind of assumes that your crank is already balanced. But I mean, these minis, there's a lot of room for flexibility there. But I hope that answers your question. If you have any more details you'd like to know about that. We also worked really, really hard. I just want to mention it on keeping the price down. It is, some people will look at that RTS clutch and think, dang, that's actually quite expensive for a clutch. But unfortunately, the way that RTS clutches have to be built is you buy multiple pieces of the same thing. So you need two springs, you need basically two clutch systems in order to make one RTS. And then there's a lot of additional supplies and labor that go into that. And then of course we wanted to use flywheels from MED that were really, really high quality that will, run really well on your engine. So it's pretty close to the cost of parts, I will say. Let's see here. BP, hey, teaching hits. Oh, hey, nice to see you over here. I normally see you on the Discord. Mine has a mechanical fuel pump on the block. What did you do? Is a replaced clutch worth the expense for someone like me? So a couple things. The mechanical pump, we are looking at the front of the engine here. So whenever I'm doing a rebuild, I kind of just completely omit the mechanical pump. If it's working, I would not remove it or change it. But if you're starting to have fueling issues, it is worth something. It's worth considering swapping that out. The mechanical pump came on earlier engines. Later engines ended up not having this opening back here. But basically, you had a mechanical pump down here near the exhaust, which I've got my opinions about that. And the cam was actually actuating the mechanical pump so then it would be pumping fuel at the exact PSI. The SU carburetors really didn't require a lot of fuel pressure. So that just kind of got fuel as it needed it and worked pretty great. I mean, there's a testament to how well some of the stock stuff worked. That said, If you are having issues with it, I would replace it with an electric pump, and I would move the electric pump into the boot of the car underneath the fuel tank. That is, if it's not a SPI, MPI, anything that requires an in-tank pump. And then that pump will be gravity fed by the bottom of the tank, and then that can be just wired into a ignition 12 volt with a relay for safety. So definitely something to consider. The other thing you said is a replaced clutch worth the expense for someone like me? The RTS clutches, something that I definitely want to mention here is that those RTS clutches are really made for very, very high torque engines, like high performance engines. Um, the stock flywheel systems are more than capable of holding 100 to 110 foot-pounds of torque. And so that will cover, I mean, even in some situations, 130 foot-pounds of torque. And in those situations, you really don't need an RTS. Like the RTS is deeply overkill. Where those RTS clutches come into play are in situations like this, or where you have a supercharge. Maybe you have a VMAX setup, Rotrex supercharger on the front, a turbo, or just you have some ultra high compression over 150, over 175 foot-pounds of torque that you need to kind of hold in place. Um, that's where that clutch would come into play. Hey, Mom, thanks for joining. I just realized it's taken me like an eon to open up this box. I'm sorry. Uh, to get back to Joseph's question, um, so what we are using in this engine is a LSD. Now, this LSD is really special because this is what's called a ATB. It's an auto torque bias limited slip differential. And the idea is that it's not an open diff. So this has fluid inside. And when you're driving the car and doing normal stuff like just driving to work, doing your normal, I don't know what just came up behind me, but that was funny. Um, uh, the once when you're just driving your car like normal, totally lost my train of thought. This diff drives like a normal car. When you punch it, the torque being applied to this differential does magic stuff inside with the fluids and locks it, kind of like brings it and causes the resistance to keep it from being a totally open differential. And it helps quite a bit with torque steer. Really, really good on high torque and high power engines like this one. Not really something that's necessary on like a regular road car, but if you are pushing higher torque, it's definitely worthwhile to move to this. And there's basically no downside. Eventually, of course, this is a service item, so it will stop. It'll just become an open diff eventually and not kind of operate the way that you expect. But that's long term. It accepts a standard crown wheel, standard final drive gear, so you can use a helical gear and not be miserable with a straight cut gearbox and super loud and all of that. So yeah, that's a long answer, but LSD, ATB LSD is what I'm using. And if y'all want, I can kind of talk about the gearbox if you have any questions or you're not sure how that works or what I'm using, blah, blah, blah. Ugh, sorry for all the loud noise. Kind of cleaning up all that stuff. I have no idea what just popped up behind me in terms of like celebration stuff. Maybe somebody sent a super chat or something, super stickers. I don't think so. I don't know. That was wild. First time I've seen that on YouTube. So I would show you guys the gearbox. As you can see, it's not attached over here. It is off in a box over there. It's very heavy, and I don't want to take it down. But the gearbox that's going on this is a question that I get pretty commonly as well, is what are you doing to the gearbox in order to manage the power that's going through it? So generally speaking, the factory gearbox itself can be modified in a way that can handle high power, high torque, all of those things. The weak spot is actually not really what's down here. The weak spot is your drop gears. And on my engine, that's going to be the weakest point. The engine is still going to be using helical drop gears because I just don't want straight cut gears. It's miserable. So I have a little bit of mechanical sympathy on this engine. The drop gears being the weakest point, I want them to survive. But inside, I'm using the Mini Spares Evolution gear set, which is a wider gear set, hardened, very, very strong. And it has just truly excellent gear ratios when paired with a 3.1 diff. And that part down here can handle the power absolutely no problem. So if anyone's considering doing that, I would strongly recommend it. Works great. BP says, I wonder how you buy your parts. Like, do you make one massive order from spares or sport to reduce the shipping? I imagine all of the packages coming to your house at an additional cost is exorbitant. Um, so it kind of varies. There's a lot of part suppliers in the US, and depending on how quickly I need something, I can reach out to 7 Mini, Moss Motors if 7 Mini's out of stock. Uh, and order something and it gets here relatively quickly, like priority mail, 2 to 3 days. Um, for bigger things like wheels, tires, gearbox bits, things like that, I just order it from Mini Spares. Most of the time, shipping for smaller items is around 15 to 20 pounds, which is, I guess, like $25 to $30, maybe a little bit more. It's not great at all, but oftentimes the Mini Spares orders get here faster than others because they're shipping DHL and they have a huge contract with them. But yeah, I do my best to order more stuff at one time to get everything at one time rather than nickel and dime myself for shipping over and over and over again, if that makes sense. Um, it just seems to be easier that way. Um, Stefan says, I think when you make such a project, costs aren't a problem. I would love that to be the case. Costs are definitely still a deep major concern. Um, the best thing I can recommend, especially with a project of the scale, is like it's okay to take a break and slow down. Like you don't need to be working and just blasting away at this stuff like nonstop. Um, Everything you see here has taken place over the course of years. Like this engine was built up. I didn't have to do much different to the engine after the previous turbo build. So it's really just this manifolded turbo and this belt drive kit instead of the timing gear setup. But the rest of it was already pretty built. So I could focus my funds and my time on the things like the ECU and the wiring and the shell and those types of things. William, hello. Managed to get down to tools and getting catched up with you. Huh. Oh, nice Sailor Brand. Hey, William Murphy here. Man, oh man. Mark B says William Murphy keeping it under 20 miles per hour. Yeah, you can't go faster than that in Wales anymore. That's what I hear. And for some reason, I got documentation about that. I don't even live in Wales. There's an email, but maybe they knew that I visited Wales at one point, and they're like, this guy needs to get this email." So, William says, "What power are you planning from the bad snail?" So I would be very happy if I still hit the same 200 horsepower figure from the previous build. This build, though, I'm not actually that fussed about making a ton of power. I mean, it was cool to like have that goal on the last build and try and meet that, and it was cool to actually achieve it. But my goal with this is I really want a excellent driver. I want it to be like overall quite reliable, and to be able to kind of modulate into boost when I want it, but for the most part, like, this is a driver. I'm gonna be driving this all the time, you know? It's not a garage build. It's gonna get used for sure. BP says, "How can Patreon members help you get more Patreon members?" Well, for those of you who don't know, I do have a Patreon that you can access. Gives you chat access to a live chat and through Discord. We're on there all the time. Well, I'm on there on all the time, answering questions, talking shit, just hanging out, which is a lot of fun. But for my Patreon members who are already members, just share that you like the service. If it's something that you like, I really enjoy offering it. It's definitely not a requirement for watching my videos, but it does really help with big projects like this. Having a following that is like verifiable allowed me to work with big companies like Haltech, and where they sent me the ECU and the PD16 to just build a car with, which was is like totally wild. That's not something that I could have done without Patreon support. So thank you for that, guys. Um, let's see here. Relly Riley, if I hope I'm saying that right. Do anyone make turbo kits for HS4 carbs? They so the HS4 carb was never really made to handle boost. So what happens is the HIF 44 was actually offered on a lot of production vehicles for in a boosted configuration. The HS4, its just general build is not made to accommodate boost. So if you think about this, what you're doing is compacting that air and shoving it through that HIF or that HS4. And because it's not built to be able to handle that boost, you're going to blow out the seals. It's not going to be able to fuel properly. Um, your best bet is to get an HIF 44, and either, if you can, get one that is already modified to be turbo ready. There were lots of turbo HIF 44s out there. If you can't find that, you can always get a used secondhand one and modify it to suit a turbo setup. But I've not seen an HS4 turbocharged before. Max Brown says, "Will you have a full parts list for the engine when it's done? I would love to do a very similar setup." So I actually do have a parts list for the first version of the turbo build, and it isn't much different from that list, but I can post that. Let me just post that in the chat right now, um, since I have it. I'm building out a list for this new build, but I kind of am behind on it because it's a lot of work to, to do that. Um, let's see here. Alrighty. So it has all the prices on it and everything as well. Here is the Google Sheet. That is the Turbo Mini price list. Uh, this was the last time I edited this was, let's see here, October 15th of 2021. So just full disclosure, those prices are probably a little bit different now. Things might have gone up, might have gone down. It's more likely that they've gone up. But yeah, that's the list for the Turbo Mini build. So basically the last rendition of the engine with the GT17 turbo. Macy Messer says, "How much was the paint job?" So for this paint job, I have the hood and the doors off to the side here because I'm keeping them a secret. Well, the doors aren't really a secret, but the hood and how I have that configured is old English white roof, willow green body, um, including the metal work. It was about $8,000, and that's US dollars. So the paint itself, I think, was about four. There was a lot of metal work, and I kind of was like, "Well, am I going to get a welder, or should I just pay somebody who knows what the heck they're doing to do this part?" I opted to pay somebody to do it. I think the price is pretty reasonable for the amount of work they had to do, which was a lot. Um, but yeah, that's about how much it cost. Sailor Brand says, "Before installing the interior, I recommend to seal the wall between the trunk and the inside because of the smell of the exhaust." Yes. So I had it sealed previously. When I pulled out all of the interior before, it obviously opened all that stuff back up. That is a major consideration of mine, to make sure that that is. I want the car to be kind of comfortable. Obviously, it's a Mark One, so there's a lot of like just bumbly, crumply like noises that happen Mark Ones, even just fresh, brand new, rebuilt ones. But that's a really good tip. Thank you. BP says, I freaking love your Patreon help. It has given me so much help and challenged me to take on impossible to me projects. I appreciate you saying that. Thank you. I'm glad that it has enabled you to do that. I hope that your ignition setup has gotten more dialed in since we last spoke about it. Joseph says, what is the color name or color code? So I also, to answer that question, I have the color is called willow green, but I have a color reference site that you can use. Um, this site lets you search for the colors. So if you type in, willow green in search, um, it will return everything that I know about the color codes and where you can get them and different color codes for different companies. Um, you can also submit stuff if you find a color code that's missing. Um, let's see here. Mr. Gadget Co says, "What's the time there?" So right now it is exactly, excuse me, 12:15. So lunchtime. Um, William Murfitt says, "When are you color matching the bike to the snail?" So I actually don't want to. I'm glad you brought this up. Um, I love the orange. What Trek calls the matte penny flake is the color name. It's really aggressively hipster, but that orange with the green just looks so good. Like, and it was. I I'm embarrassed to say that it was a consideration when I was picking out my colors because I'm gonna get one of those sea sucker mounts that mounts you could put your bike on the back of the car. I go mountain biking a lot, and I definitely want to bring the bike to the mountain biking places with the Mini. And it has to look good if it's on the back of the car. Mr. Gadget Motor Co. says, I'm the one who commented on the windscreen removal and installation tutorial. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah. So to put your mind at ease, I am definitely going to be there's two videos specifically that I'm going to be kind of having their own separate DIY videos. Obviously, this is all build, like assembly, getting it set up, running it, all of those things part of the Restomod build. But I'm going to make two independent videos, one for installing the windscreen and the front and the rear windscreen and show you how unpleasant that job is and how to do that. And then the other one is I'm going to show you guys how to attach and trim out the headliner frame for a Mark One. I haven't seen that on YouTube for a Mark One frame, and it's definitely something that I want to show you guys how to do. The color code for Old English White, it should be on my site, Old English White. I think I updated the codes on there. Yeah, so there's a couple versions of it on the website, just from different years. I think the earlier years had kind of like a warmer white, and then later years it was a little more white. Mine's the earlier color. I would give you the exact code. I see that I didn't actually update it on there. It's sitting on my desk up in my house, so I don't have an answer to that to you right now. But check back. I'll update that later today. So if you check back tomorrow on that side, it'll have the code. Relly Riley says, replacing my head gasket with a composite one. My copper one failed after 9 months. I think I installed it wrong. How do you correctly heat cycle the car after header install? Um, okay, so there is a lot of misinformation about these head gaskets on the internet. There's like a million different opinions about it, but I can kind of put that to bed now. Um, Head gaskets, especially ones that are, this composite material, which is what I'm using in this too. They come with instructions on exactly how to heat cycle it. If they didn't come with it, the manufacturer of those head gaskets does have that information. And the ones that you commonly see on the minis that are composite, have a kind of like tacky film on them. And the intention of that film is to create a seal between the two surfaces. And the way that you do that is to heat cycle the engine for a period of time, basically no coolant in the engine, start it up, and let the car heat up just a little bit to kind of melt that film layer in between the two mating surfaces. Bring it back down, turn it off. You obviously don't want to run it too long because it does get hot pretty quickly. And the instructions from that head gasket company will tell you how long to, or what temperature you need to bring it up to. After you've done that, you let the coolant, or you let the engine cool down, fill it up with coolant, nip up all of the bolts. Do not loosen them and then torque them again. Just bring them up to an additional, just recheck the torque, just tick, 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 all the way around to the original torque. If you have ARP bolts, those can go up to 50 foot-pounds, and then you are done. That's it. Obviously you fill it up with coolant and run it. But that is the kind of short and sweet of it. William says one of my clients has a matching bike to his Testarossa and will be using it when driving about. See, yeah, so you get it. This is basically a Testarossa. I couldn't even keep a straight face saying that. It's definitely not like a Testarossa. But yeah. So Max Brown says, how easy is it to retrofit the Haltech to a non-SPI engine? Actually, from my opinion, the key, this is true for any ECU, any aftermarket ECU. I actually think it's a little bit easier in some regards to retrofit an engine that was not fuel injection to fuel injection, because there's kind of like less stuff that you have to work around or accommodate. It's not to say that it is the easiest. There are some some things that are nice, like SPI and MPI engines have trigger position systems that are built into the flywheel. On a converted engine, you have to do a trigger position sensor like this. This one's very custom to mine because of the front mount intercooler, but we do sell a kit that bolts on. Actually, I have one. Let me show you. So I did a video on this a little while ago, but we sell this kit. This is a CNC setup, and it's made to suit and fit any factory pulley setup. You can also get the MED pulley if you want to, but ours just lets you use your factory pulley. And then it comes with a little bracket here that, if I could remember how, I think I have this on upside down, but basically lets you track the position of the crank this way. I think it's easier. The biggest things that I think the hardest parts are going to be replacing your fuel tank. You need a fuel tank with a return. Definitely something that I would recommend doing. And that actually looks like an ad is running. It notifies me now. So if you're missing this, I'll come back to it. But the trigger position sensor, and then you have your fuel injected throttle body. You can go with our cable driven one. It's really nice. It's basically identical to the drive by wire one. It's just using a cable. And then coolant temp sensor to go into the ECU, and then the trigger position sensor. I've totally lost my train of thought. The fuel tank that you need to put in has to have a return so that you can run the excess fuel that's not being used by injectors back into the fuel tank. So hopefully that helps. I feel like I went on a little tangent there, but if you have any more specific questions. The Haltech setups, though, specifically are just incredibly easy to work on. Like, for those of you who haven't worked on an ECU or tuned something before, it's so easy to work with. Their software lets you, especially if you buy the harnesses that come with the ECUs, their software lets you map, shows you the color codes, attach input to a specific circuit, or a specific function. It's all very, I think, self-explanatory. But if you need a base for that, I also sell base maps for Haltech, Emerald, DTA Fast. There's a few other ECUs that I sell base maps more for, but just to get you started, if you feel like that's something that you need. Um, do. Let's see here. I always wonder about the small bore versus big bore head gasket kit. Um, you want to maybe explain that a little bit more? What you're asking there? I'm not. Don't know what the question is exactly. Um, I do agree with Will. The copper gaskets are just garbo. I wouldn't. I don't use them anymore. I hate those copper gaskets. I always use the composite ones. They seal better. They are just you I mean, you can tell when you just hold them side by side just how much nicer those composite gaskets are. And they also, in my case, accommodate boost a lot better than a copper gasket. James Portman, hello, welcome. Thanks for joining. My EFI buddy. Um, CJ Laser says that green looks great, by the way. Thank you. I think so too. I love it. I'm so excited about it. So, a little bit of backstory. The Bad Wolf in the blue color that I had, while I did like that blue pretty good, it wasn't the color that I asked the paint shop to paint it. I asked for them to paint it Tahiti blue. Uh, and there are different variations of Tahiti blue I've learned, or I learned at the time, and they didn't mix it correctly. And I realized I was kind of looking for more of a midnight blue, but I just left it. The paint job was done. I wasn't about to have them repainted at the time, and it looked good. So, rolled with it for what, 12, 13, 14 years, however long. Let's see. What else? Jokerscape says I recently converted a 1986 Mini Mayfair Auto to manual as auto engine clutch packs failed, and I considered going Haltech while doing this, but funds didn't allow me at the time. Did come across another annoying issue though. My speedo was faulty, so I replaced the PCB. And since the speedo does not show speed, have new cable. It's all fitted correctly, but both ends snug up, still no speed. I'm not sure what gauge you have, but depending on the gauge, sometimes inside the gauge or sometimes the ends of the cable. I don't have a gearbox cable with me right now, but they'll round themselves off. So even if you have it fully snugged up in place, there could be a rounded out hole in there. And with that gearbox drive gear just spinning, um, it might not be even spinning the speedometer at all. BP says my ECU is the MED setup with the DTA fast. Is the Haltech easier and worth switching? So I would say the Haltech is more than you need for what you are doing with your engine. Just I know the context of his engine, which is 1275 ignition only ECU. You also have the more modern version of the DTA fast ECU, which is a objectively good ECU. I do think that also the Haltech software is objectively better, or I should say subjectively better. But it is definitely not enough to move to a Haltech ECU. Um, the things that your DTA fast ECU do are going to be the same as what the Haltech ECU will do in your setup since it's ignition only. Um, Haltech's ECUs are capable of full fuel injection, lots of additional sophistication and additional sensors. And I just don't think you need it when you're still running a carb and you've got your kind of like more traditional setup for your engine. Um, let's see here. CJ Laser says, I need to have the valve seats on my 998 upgraded to hardened seats. Is that recommended or should I use an additive and keep going the way it is? So, two things with that. Uh, if you can upgrade to the hardened seats, I would do it. They're going to be more reliable. They're going to handle the ethanol mixtures of fuel these days. But what you will find is some heads don't have enough meat in the actual head casting to accommodate the hardened valve seats. Uh, they the hardened valve seats are thicker and a little bit wider than your kind of like traditional original valve seats that were in the engines. And so as a result, sometimes you can't get them in there. So your machinist will be able to tell you whether or not it's possible. But I would definitely upgrade to hardened seats. And if you are upgrading to hardened seats, I would consider replacing the valve guides as well if they're worn. Just see if oh gosh, lost my train of thought. The valve, jiggles in there. Robert Basil says, I just want to thank you for sharing your vast knowledge of these awesome cars to us who have no clue what we're doing, but fix our cars following your videos. That's really kind of you to say. Thank you for saying that. Um, I started at the same place you did. I didn't know anything about these cars when I bought my Mini. I was lucky enough to connect up with a really close friend of mine now here in Charlotte, and he helped teach me tons and tons of things about these cars over the years. So thank you for that, Justin. If you're watching this, and was connected up with him, I then obviously kind of just kept going down the rabbit hole, and I like to learn, I like to read, and so um, I use that as a way to kind of help share it with you guys. So thanks for that. Jokerscape says 3 o'clock in front of the driver clock, so brand new cable. Yeah, so even if the cable is brand new, the housing that it goes into on your speedometer or on the speedometer drive coming out of the gearbox can be rounded out. So the drive itself could be perfectly, your new cable could be perfectly square, but what it's going into is rounded out. Let's see here. Capo Carpetta says, which boot seal do you want to use? The 26 Metal Clip Mark 1 or the 23 C to the Mark 3 seal? I don't know why I said 23. I'm currently having trouble getting the boot sealed no matter what I use. A previous owner glued the old seal in place. I ran into this issue before. Let me show you guys something. I'll grab it right now. So one of the things I would check is to make sure that the boot that you are using is the correct one for your car. So you can see this is a Mark 1 boot. It's got a different mold on it. And then if your car is a Mark 1, you want to use a Mark 1 boot and you want to use the Mark 1 boot seal that has the clips into the seal. If you have a later, maybe you have a mismatched boot seal, or maybe you have an earlier car with a mismatched boot like I used to. It's never really going to seal quite perfectly, and you'll probably have to find some combination of just like hardware store seals that are going to seal it up right. I know that's not ideal, but that's basically what I had to do until I actually bought the correct boot lid. I miss Sagan Carl. Yes, I miss Carl Sagan too. That green looks fabulous. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Darkscape says, thanks for taking the time to read and reply to my comment. Need to take a look at the instruments. Yeah, so actually, Darkscape, if it is on the engine side, that getting to that sensor, which is like kind of like right down here, is kind of a pain in the ass, like no denying it, but they're easy. Once you get that off, they're easy enough to replace with a new drive if they are rounded out or messed up inside there. On the speedometer side, you might be able to kind of like pinch it back into square. But if you can't do that, I don't know that there's a way to replace those without getting a new speedometer, which, sorry. Bill Johnson says, hey, Cole, looking like it's about time for the coil pack mount, putting the new engine in soon. Yeah, I just got your email. Sorry, I haven't responded yet. I'm notorious for not responding to emails on the weekend. Sorry about that. Yeah, the engine will be going in relatively soon. I'm still waiting on the whole drop gear housing assembly and everything from Paul over at HRE. He is helping me get a RTS clutch built. It's something that I started working with him on before we started production of our RTS clutches, which is kind of funny. But once that gets over here, we'll get that all fully assembled, and I'll have an actual fully assembled engine. But the shell actually needs to go back up to the paint shop for probably another like week, I would guess, to do a few paint corrections on the roof. Nothing serious, just a few little tits and tats of tweaks there. So, but I definitely would love to get it out sooner rather than later, because then I can kind of like get in there and fiddle with where it's going to mount and all of that stuff before either kind of before the engine goes in, but also after. BP says, you're my favorite call. Thanks, man. I wish I could thank you in person and give you a bro hug for who you are and all you do. I'm very grateful. That's super kind of you. Thank you. You should come out to CMU next year. Well, it'll be in 2025, but come out to CMU. either drive your car out, which is what I would recommend doing, or fly on out and we'll have a seat in a car for you. You can ride with me if you don't drive your car out. CJ Laser says, I don't have timing marks on my timing cover and have been using the flywheel markings. Is there an easier way? And what RPM should it be at idle? So, couple things. If there's no timing mark on your pulley, it's only in the flywheel. Um, you just got to kind of work with it. Like you could kind of manually rotate the engine over until you have the top dead center mark on your flywheel lined up with top dead center. And then you can mark your own marking over here. Perfectly, uh, blah, 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 blah. Lost my train of thought. That's a perfectly good option. And then you'll have, two different places you can mark it at. In my opinion, the kind of like perfect idle for mark, let's see here, 998 with, I assume you mean HS2 carburetor on there. Either that. There were no really HS1s on these cars. I don't even know if the HS1 is a thing. Now that I say that out loud. Anyway, I like it to be around like 800 RPM, and like especially the 998s, they can actually idle pretty low, which is great. If you modify the engine or has like a different cam or whatever different things done to it, sometimes it can be hard to get it to idle that low. Like this engine seems to, I haven't gotten the drive-by-wire set up yet, but it seems to really only like to idle at about like 900, 950. But we'll fiddle with that a little bit. But yeah, so about 800, 850. It's a good spot. Let's see. Da, 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 da. My mom, dad and I are still in shock about the cost of the paint job. Yeah, I know it was super cheap, right? Um, I when I was looking for pricing for it, keep in mind this was a fully sandblasted shell with primer on it. Like it was as stripped can get, and it was ready for the paint shop to do whatever they needed to do. And I went to, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 different custom shops. The ones that didn't just say, "Sorry, we can't do it," would quote me 10, 15, 16, $20,000 to do this job, and I'm just like, "Get out of here." The car is the size of a Tic Tac. Like, I know that paint and body is extremely, like, labor intensive, but I'm sure that they were just giving me the, like, F off price, like, "We don't wanna do it," but, I mean, just lunacy. Just craziness. And like for clarification, if this was going to be a concourse car and I was never going to drive it, I'd want and the paint job had to be perfectly perfect with no waves and no this and no that. Like, sure, spending a lot of money on that makes sense, but like it's a driver. I want the paint to be reliable. I don't want it to flake off or like chip and like in ways that, a paint job shouldn't. But, you know, gotta be reasonable here. Like, not everything's a multi-bajillion dollar paint job. I have also heard that recently like the actual paints that people are using have gone up in price, which is totally fair. That cost has to get passed on. Somebody has to pay for it, really. And the customer is usually the one who does that, which is reasonable. But um, I don't know, like paint. Yeah, I don't know. I could rant about this forever. I do know it's labor intensive, but rant, rant, rant. Um, da, da, da. Had to paint. So Riley Reed says, had to paint my car and do my own welding because nobody would touch my car. Yeah, I think a lot of people just don't want to do anything except like crash repairs on modern cars. Painting this car is definitely a way different animal than painting a modern car. And that's totally fair. Like it's a lot of risk taking on something like this. And some folks just don't want to do that for their work, and that's fine. I mean, there's no shortage of cars that need paint repairs for crashes, bumps, dings, insurance claims. That's like it's got to get done. Um, let's see here. I missed Mm, mm. Okay, get caught up. Max Brown says, "What's the best way to convert a car to AN lines, and is it worth it?" Define worth it. Like that's kind of I would say that's kind of an opinion piece. I think it's worth it if I can find the. Oh, it's literally on the desk right in front of me. Um, Though I do think it's worth it. It's easier to take them on and off. They tend to have better seals. It's more reliable. It's not just going to like blow itself off from pressure or anything like that. But that said, the way that have done it on this build and other builds is everywhere that I have a fuel line going into something that is already kind of an existing port or line or something like that, especially the hard lines, is to use these olive style mounting things. So this comes with one connector like this, and this is 6 AN nat, and then you have a little olive. This goes onto a 5/16 hose, and so this goes in here and then the 5/16 hose. So you put this on, then you put this on, and then you put this on, and it screws in. Oops, that's backwards, and compresses that olive down. And when it compresses it, it like squeezes down on that 5/16 line, and so then you have lines like I don't. You have basically you have your copper or stainless 5/16 lines now with an AN fitting on it where you can accommodate, your AN lines and then run those to where you need to. You can always swap those back too to barb fitting. So like, you can do AN from the fuel line with pretty braided line and then swap it back to a barb fitting. So AN to barb and then connect that right to the carburetor if that's what you're converting it to. Our in fuel injection throttle bodies, you can see these are 1/8 inch MPT, if I remember correctly, or 1/4 inch. I think actually, I think it's eighth. Um, and so this rail right here can take either fittings that have a barb on them or AN fittings. And so we do AN on this, and then it just screws right on too. Da, da, da. Let's see here. BP says, if it's too expensive, it would be hard to enjoy. I'd just be stressing the whole time. Yeah, I mean, I I definitely am with you on that. I'm probably already going to be stressing even with just this paint job, and I got to wait for it to cure. He said to wait a few months, but once that time period passes, you can. I'm going to put PPF on the front, so basically all of the fenders and the front side of the car, and then maybe the quarter panel, something like that. I'm not quite sure exactly where all I'm going to get it. Definitely down in this space because that's always seemed to get damaged. But I want PPF on this so that it survives many years to come because I drive this car everywhere. Like I drive it on dirt roads, I drive it on gravel roads, I drive it on road roads. Like it's meant to be driven. I have some fun with it. Um, William, get your mind out of the gutter. Blow itself off. Oh, let's see here. Bill Johnson says the olive style to actually technically a furl. That one's a hard one for me to say for some reason. Are called compression fittings. Yeah. Um, Basically, I always have like British terms and American terms kind of bouncing around in my head, and I've completely lost sight of which one is which. And so, like, I think most people in the UK call them olives, and then furls and like compression fittings. That's a good way to do it. Um, Sailor Brand says, "This is why my car is still this ugly." Nah, get out of here. Like it's all trade-offs, right? CJ Laser says the same thing. I like the ratty look of my car. Having a car that's a little bit, scratched, a little bit damaged, or like maybe not exactly perfect is going to give you so much more. I don't know. I feel like it can give you a lot more enjoyment because you're not worried about like is someone leaning on it and scratching it, or is someone going to mess it up? Which is nice. Just drive the car, run it, make sure it still works. Um, you know, right now I'm in like perfectionist mode building this, but uh eventually that's not going to be the case anymore. But right now, everything's so perfectly clean, and I want it to stay clean and like nice, and I'm going to do that. But, you know, trade offs. Um, BP says, will you do the PPF or third party install? Definitely third party. I don't think that I would do it to a standard that I would like, if that makes sense. Same reason I didn't do the paint and body. I know that I'm an instant gratification kind of guy when it comes to building and working on stuff. So, like, I need to replace the oil pump. Damn, that new oil pump looks awesome. I like that. Paint is like, I need to paint the car. Let me sand it for 400 days and then sand it down, put more primer on it, sand it down, put more primer on it. Like, no, that doesn't jive with me. Ah, oh, yeah. Joker Shape says inner wing, and it caused a. Oh wait, I missed something. Pocket Rocket Garage. Hello, thanks for joining. Recently hand painted my car with rattle cans. I didn't use automotive paint. Actually used graffiti paint and a lot of lacquer. I have since found that the paint is too soft underneath, and I knocked the inner wing, and it caused a hairline crack on the outer wing. I was so pissed off. Yeah, obviously didn't let it cure long enough before the lacquer. Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about paints, but like I have been uh, walking around this like super gingerly for that reason. I'm afraid I'm gonna bump it and it's gonna just like shatter. Probably wouldn't do that, but no sense in being too careful. Max Brown says, would you do a video on how to cover the front end in fiberglass? Uh, Front end in fiberglass removable. Front end fiber. Front end fiber. Oh, I see. Like the whole front end of the car and like doing a fiberglass front, like flip front or something that pops off. I don't know how or when I could do a video on that. There'd have to be a customer car. I'd have to have the time to do it. But I mean, I'm not totally opposed to it. There's just not a scenario I can see in the near future where I'd be able to make that video, given the things that are required to do it. Let's see here. CJ Laser says, what other modifications or upgrades do you recommend? I've done an alternator conversion and on my way to change to spin on oil filter today. Those are specifically the spin on oil filter is a really good one. These cars, depending on the year of your car, had like the cartridge filters, and like in my opinion, or in my experience, they always leak. Like no matter how good you get that seal in there, and spin on filters are readily available everywhere. Awesome. It kind of just depends on what you want to use the car for. Uh, there's like quality of life things, like more modern seat belts, adding a stereo system if that's something that you want to do now that you have an new alternator setup. You can, like do sound deadening inside the car, close cell phone, things of that nature. It's really about just what you value in your car. Uh, there's I usually focus on quality of life stuff. What is going to make driving this car more comfortable or more pleasant for me? And then that's where I kind of branch off from there. Bill Johnson says, "Oh, do the back edges of the doors in PPF. That was done on my GTI. Very helpful." Oh, interesting. So like the the back edge, like on the car. So here, or the face that's the actual face of the door? What part are you talking about? That does seem like this seems like it'd be a good place, or down here in the sill feels like it'd be a good place. Fast Mini says, I like the pedal setup. Are you going to make a video of how you did it? I was thinking about doing like a little short, but if you want me to, I can carry this computer over there and just show you guys kind of how it's set up. Alrighty. Can you guys see that? Okay, so it's actually not that complicated, but I got this idea from Turbo Cooper Sport, Steve Blakemore on Facebook. But Turbo Cooper Sport, he's got an MPI that he's doing a drive-by-wire setup. And the way that this works is this right here is a DSM pedal. This is, mounts directly to the factory location. I just loved the way that he did this. I was gonna do a whole pedal replacement, but then he said, "Hey, I found the sensor. This is a Honda Acura part, and there's a bracket that I welded onto the top here." And I have to stress that I copied all of this from Steve, so it's not my genuine or it's not my idea here. And then rose joint between the DSN pedal. So I just drilled this hole out a little bit bigger, welded on an arm onto the actuating system. And when you press it, it just actuates the pedal. And so the goal here with how long this is too, the rose joint, is you don't want it too long because you don't want to run this all the way up to the stopper, but you also don't want it too short because you couldn't get full pedal articulation. And the cool thing is with drive-by-wire pedals like this, once you have it all in where it is right now, in the ECU, you are setting the 0 point and the 100% point. So once I get the carpets in, or once I get everything set up, this I calibrate it. This is 0%, and then all the way down is 100%, even though you're not going to the full actuation point of the sensor. So again, this is a Honda Acura part. So this is like a standard, I think it was $87 on Amazon. And they're easily replaceable. It's got 2 bolts in there. That's basically it. So hopefully that answers that question. Ooh, and I couldn't see the computer, so if you guys were talking to me, I have no idea what you were saying. Ooh, ooh, shaky. Sorry about that. BP says, dude, lol, I'm the same way. Paint projects suck because they take so long. Yeah, yeah, you get it. I'm gonna cancel that. Do back to live chat. All right, let's see. What else do we have here? Laura Brown says, "Hey Cole, Kason here. Where do you send heads in the east side to be gone through?" Um, oh man, sorry. My brain just did not compute what you were asking me. um, cylinder heads. Okay, so I'm down in Charlotte, North Carolina. So kind of like middle of the East Coast. There has been a drastic reduction in the amount of engine and machine shops that are out there. That said, I did find a machine shop down in Rock Hill, South Carolina, called McCraw's Engine something something. They did this block. They did the Cooper S block that I did. I haven't had them do head work. And the last time I had head work done in the States was years ago, and the shops that I use just don't exist anymore. And so I haven't done head work with him, but it might be something that he's interested in doing. In reality, there isn't that much nuance in the way that the cylinder heads work. Aside from just like how much meat can you get to put in hardened valve seats and things like that. But um, let me find a link to it. I'll just post it in the chat right now. Uh, Engine rebuild Rock Hill. The guy was really nice, like super. Please Google Maps, work with me here. But yeah, he was super nice. I'm sure you could ship something to him if you go with him. Just let him know that I sent you over there. Trying to build up a good relationship with him, so maybe he can give me some discounts in the future. um, Bill Johnson, in reference to the PPF on the doors, the back edge of the door itself. So when you open the door, you don't accidentally bump the edge. That's a good idea. I will. I'll take a look at that once I get to the stage where I can do PPF. Laura Brown says, "What causes poor compression in all cylinders evenly? Outside of the valve sealing and the block tested for combustion gases, no smoke either. So I'm not sure it's leaking past the rings. I'm lost. It might just be a head gasket. It is kind of unusual for all 4 cylinders to be poor, um, poor in a compression test. Uh, I do wonder maybe if you have a like faulty tool, might be worth just checking to see if you have another tool, another compression tester you can verify it with. Um, let's see here. It 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 seems unlikely that it'd be leaking past the rings on all four rings. Like you'd get maybe I don't know. I think you'd see more of a differential with one over the other. Um, but it's definitely something worth checking. Heads torqued down all the way. Like, just thinking if there's anything else that I would recommend. Yeah, I think that's where I'd start. Just with a different tool, see if you get the same reading. All righty. What else y'all got for me? Hmm. Mm-mm-mm. Probably keep this running for another, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes, and then it'll be lunchtime for me. Gotta go let the puppy out, let him do all of his business and enjoy the sunny, wonderful weather we have here in Charlotte today. I guess I'll enjoy it too, but you know, puppy. Um, BP says, who will I use for the interior?" So I really, really wanted to work with Optimize Automotive, but with like shipping logistics and like the seats that I have, and I really love the seats that I have already. It just didn't end up making sense. Though I would not hesitate at all to work with Optimize Automotive. He's got some really excellent stuff. I used a combination of two places. So I went to Newton Commercial for a lot of the kind of like factory stuff. So door cards, headliner, replacement for the new frame, and I mean for the Mark One frame, black carpets, black interior. All of that came from Newton Commercial because it was easy. Um, and then as far as the original seats, so you can actually see them. They are right there. Those are the factory original Mark One seats for the rear, and then below there is the other seats. They're kind of blocked off right now, but I'll just keep them over there for right now. Thumbs down. Ouch. Don't know where that came from. Anyways, never seen a thumbs down pop up on a live stream like that before. Anyways, the seats were retrimmed here in Charlotte by a really cool shop local in Charlotte, whose name I have forgotten. I wrote it down, and but they're close by me. So basically, they took the original Mark One seats, and they're semi-original Cobra seats that I have, and retrimmed them for me to match the Newton Commercial stuff. Nick Proof Certified. That's a fun name. Hey, Cole, I had a similar problem to Laura with my 850. The head gasket had blown all the way from 1 to 4. That is wild. I've never seen that before. I normally see it in between the two middle cylinders, 2 and 3, but man, that's nuts. Um, da, 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 da. Fernando Gomez says, "So what engine swap is going in there?" No engine swap, just this turbo A series that's right behind me. I'll switch it around so you can actually see the turbo again, because just look at that. So pretty. So pretty. That's what's going in there. No engine swaps. Let's see. Just rest my Jokerscape says, "Just got my roast dinner handed to me." That is amazing. I don't know what is roasted. It's pot roast. I love pot roast. I'm probably gonna go get a burger at lunchtime. Excuse me. Kind of craving a Wendy's burger. I don't eat fast food a lot, but yeah, sometimes the craving hits. Kevin Shale says, what's the benefits from your current turbo setup compared to the one you removed?" So the kind of like top list of different things, because they are really similar, and genuinely you can't go wrong with either of these guys. They make really, really excellent builds. But the core difference is that this portion of the system is all equal length headers. So all of these three headers, same length. You can see this one's slightly larger because of the shared inlet, shared exhaust ports up here. Um, and then this all goes into a single collector here and then goes to a different, more modern style turbo. So the turbo itself is just from a spec sheet, it is more efficient at compressing air, which means that you are going to require less exhaust gases to generate boost quicker. So my hope, and it won't, I won't know until I get it all running and everything, but my hope based on the boost curves on these is that this one will get up to boost a little bit faster, so lower RPM required to get to the power range. And then, of course, you have this big down pipe that runs down. This right here is a no clamp spring fitting that is made for stainless steel. So there's two aggressively strong springs, and when it heats up, it swells a little bit and basically creates an airtight seal down here. So you don't have to get down with your goofy big ass hands and like get a clamp on this. This just slots kind of like sleeves into this, the down pipe, the rest of it, I should say the link pipe. And so that's a big difference as well. Let's see. Aside from that, oh, this one is not water cooled anymore. It's only oil fed. So oil feed goes in, oil goes out, but it does mean that I will need an oil cooler, most likely, to keep the oil temperatures under control. So no plumbing the water into that either, which will be a nice little reduction of hoses. Jokerscape says, like how are like how you are or Mini Sevens are working with AC Dodd, what a legend he is. Um, I'm not sure if that's a question or a statement. I don't know that Seven Mini Parts are working with AC Dodd. They might be. But yeah, I like AC. He's a really nice guy. He has something that I really try and focus on with this channel, which is like helping people learn. He loves teaching people, and he's like genuinely interested in helping you learn how to do this stuff yourself. Especially with like tuning the SU carbs and all of that, because that kind of knowledge um, is generational. And so as you know, folks who grew up with these cars start to retire and pass on, that knowledge is disappearing. And so he's really keen on keeping that alive, which I think is super cool. Um, BP says, wait, so if you do those gestures, it'll automatic wait, so if I do the peace sign, how long do I have to hold this up? That's the most ridiculous thing. Okay, what else is there? So, like, celebrate? What does this do? I don't know, I'm just making this up. Maybe nothing. That's crazy. I've never seen that before. Um, Riley says, "Keep overwatching your video on clutch replacement. About to attempt it myself. Will the timing marks stay aligned when I put the new clutch in?" Yeah, so when you put the new clutch in, basically your whole flywheel assembly can be placed 180 degrees out. So there's there's like, um, depending on where you mount your, actually, you know what? I think you might be okay. Yeah, no, never mind. I'm thinking of the C clip. The C clip can go on in two different orientations, but the flywheel itself is offset that line and that holds it into the crank down here. So it'll still be in the same orientation. You're good. You're good. Had to think through that a little bit. Macy Messer says, "Why do you only use one-way brake cylinder? What is secret? I follow you from Germany." So there's no secret. I like the way that these single-line brake cylinders look much more than the later ones. That's really what it boils down to. The single-line system it works, it does the job, it's just fine. Dual-line systems will have redundancy and some safety features. Obviously, in the nature of having two lines. So it's less likely for you to lose your brakes entirely. But in my experience, unless a line just simply gets severed from like front to back or something like that, your brakes will normally start to warn you when you start to lose braking. You're not gonna just, in most situations, you won't just totally lose braking. So yeah, it all boils down to I like the way those chrome ones look more than the later ones. Let's see here. Da, da, da. Laura Brown says there's a mixed review I find on Honda swaps. What are your thoughts? Okay, hot take. Um, Actually, I don't know if this is a hot take. Uh, I think that for the cost of doing a Honda swap for the power you get is better than something like this that I'm doing right here. This is expensive, like no way around it. To make an A series engine handle boost and not blow up correctly is expensive. And if you are spending that money and are more focused on reliability, the Honda engine is arguably more reliable. But the issue comes in with the complexity required to accommodate a Honda engine in this engine bay, how it changes the driving profile, and kind of all of the supplementary things. You know, the whole front subframe is different for the Honda engines. You are now introducing an engine unit that has its own list of, issues that come with it. Hondas are very reliable, but they also have their own issues. So now you have many issues related to your suspension and Honda engine issues that are related to the Honda engine. So there's trade-offs. I mean, this, from my opinion, is like bragging rights, kind of cooler. Like, yeah, I have the original A series and I did some crazy baloney to it on the side here. Um, but then the Honda engine is also cool in its own right. I think that the common misconception though is that Honda engines are just inherently easier and like that just Honda swap it. Like it's not that easy and it's not cheap either. It's just a little less expensive than something like this. Da, da, da. Kevin Shell says that's a good idea with the exhaust springs due to the expansion. Yes. Yeah, I'm super excited. That's actually one of my most excited parts about this is that um like when I had the previous setup and really the stock LCB setup, just the 3 branches that came down, it was always leaking there, like, always. It's just so irritating. And it gets smoky or it gets loud and this, I'm hoping, is going to eliminate that. We'll see. Mm, mm, mm. Oh, okay, let's see, 2 thumbs up? That one? Oh, okay. I did that one earlier. I get it now. That's so silly. Um, Kevin Shale says that setup reminds me of the old Janspeed turbo setup that some of the Metro turbos had, but instead of an SU carb, it had a Weber. Oh, oh, I've seen this setup. I think I remember seeing Turbo Phil had one. Maybe he was selling one. I don't remember. Yeah, that was pretty wild looking. I imagine a Weber would be pretty cool with a turbo. I I can only imagine how tuning that would be, but, like, once you got it dialed in, I feel like it would work probably pretty well. Pretty neat. That Turbo SU, though, I mean, it works, does its job. Um, let's see here. Fast Mini says A series sound much better than a Honda. I would agree. I don't really like the way Hondas sound. I'm sure that there are a lot of people who disagree with that, but uh, this just sounds. There's something about the way that the exhaust note on these sound. It's just a lot better. And what's wild is because of the turbo, this is actually a much quieter system than even the stock setup was. Unless you have like no, I have a twin box setup that I'm going to be running on this because I like my exhaust quiet. But with this turbo in the way, the sound of the exhaust is actually quieter because it's being it's running this impeller. It's got to go through a bunch of stuff that's dissipating sound in there. So yeah, it's kind of cool actually. um oh my god, yeah, Kevin, nothing worse than trying to separate a Y piece on an LCB. Yeah, there's not much worse on on the mini than having to separate one of those that's been on there for a few years. Good lord. Max Brown says, "Will you be running an external wastegate for all the turbo noise?" Not on this setup. So Ben, who makes these kits, Bag Sport Fabrications, will do an external wastegate. They fit quite nicely, and it is usually like somewhere up here, like on this space. But in my case, this turbo is already internally wastegated, and I just decided I'm just going to keep that. It works fine. No sense in swapping it out. And I've got the blow off valve for the psh, psh noises, but the exhaust noises itself, that'll just be just through the internal wastegate. Da, da, da. BP says if you're on an M1, go to the green camera icon on the top right for more reactions. Oh, this is an Apple thing. Oh, okay. So thumbs up. I do a heart. That's just silliness. Okay. Um, let's see here. How do I do rain? I mean, I clicked it, but how do I do rain? Celebrate lasers, fireworks, balloons. That's too funny. That is super fun. Leave it to Apple to make some just silliness like that. Oh man. Okay. So throat's getting a little tired, ready from a burger. Probably gonna wrap this up. Are there any other questions that you guys want to ask me before we finish this up? I'll take 3 or 4 more questions, and then we'll call it a day. Kevin Shale says, oh, hang on, there was a question before that. What's your must-need mod on a Mini? Um, I think that if I boiled it down to nothing else on the car, maybe a stock Mini, modified Mini, no matter what it is, I think the number one mod is probably just a reliable stereo system. Like, having a backdrop of music when you're driving is, like, completely will change the driving experience. I think that's the best one for me. Totally unrelated to engines and stuff. If it was engine specific, I would say an electronic module inside your distributor. So get rid of the points and move to an electronic unit. They're so much more reliable, especially in the rain. And it's a really easy modification to just slap into your existing distributor. Kevin Shale says, "What's the actual color of the Mini now?" This color is called Willow Green. I think it ran from 60 to 67, and then the roof is Old English white, but you can't really see it from here. Um, Laura Brown says, "How do you account for an additional camshaft end play? I have new thrust plate and new gear, still measuring too much." Camshaft end play. So you're talking about the cam moving in and out of the engine, assuming. Um, so one thing I would check is that the retaining plate is fully on, and seated properly. Next thing I would check is that the gear that you are installing has been shimmed up correctly, that and then also torqued down correctly. Um, the that gear will have a little bit of play in it from the face of the where it kind of like goes up against the retaining plate. Sometimes that will have a little bit of play. Um, way I've understood this is that it allows the gear to move out a little bit to connect to the crank gear and perfectly level those out. So hopefully that helps. Choo, 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 choo. Thanks for your advice. Thank you. Oh, 100K. This is a good one. What's one mod you installed but regretted? Above all else, the worst modification I ever installed was hood pins or bonnet pins. The ones that like go in here and there, and sometimes people put them here and there. I didn't put them in the front, but genuinely, one, the absolute worst thing to install. Super stressful, not something that I would wish on my worst enemies. Um, but it just didn't work great. And like, oh man, squeaky chair. Um, but like you have these hood pins, now your hood always has to go somewhere if you take it off. So one of super frustrating. You take the hood off, you set it down, you lean it up against something, you set it on the roof with a blanket. No matter what, your hood is no longer on the car, and you're introducing risk for getting it damaged. Initially, I used to like set it off in the grass next to me, away from people, but then I had someone step on it, and like my heart just sank inside, and like, yeah, never again. What I will say is a happy medium is put it on original hinges, but many spare cells, depending on your car, removable quick release hinge mounts. So you can put it on the hinges, but they have quick releases. So if you ever do need to take the hood off, you can, but it's not just always got to come off. So, but yeah, I think that's it. No more questions in the chat. Everyone's been super great. Thank you everyone for joining and being really kind and asking questions. And I'm gonna do another heart to get the reaction, right? There it is. It's the hearts. Um but yeah, thank you so much. Oh, just to answer the last question, the cam that I have in this engine is the Phase 2 Avon bar cam. It's a turbo specific camshaft. If you want an NA specific one, the Swift Tune cams are really good. AC Dodds cams are also really good. I'm gonna do more hearts. I'm gonna do it. There we go. Alrighty. Thanks everybody for joining. I'm gonna go get a burger. I hope you have a good afternoon. See ya.